وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. القول مني في جميع الأشياء قول آل محمد فيما أسروا وما أعلنوا وفيما بلغني عنهم وفيما لم يبلغني. أما بعد، فقد قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. A emotion or a state that most people go through and that most people feel is something by the name of stress. Many people, when you sit down with them, when you talk to them, you tell them, how's everything been? How are you? They'll tell you, I'm stressed. I'm always stressed. It's always stress. I feel stressed. I was stressed. I'm going to be stressed. They always say that I'm stressed. Now, what we want to look at in today's lecture, inshallah, is what is stress? What are the causes of stress? What are the effects of stress? And what are the treatments of stress based off psychological evidence and based off our religion? And more specifically, looking at the words or the narrations of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. So stress is defined as a response of the body to a perceived challenge or threat. Now, these terminologies I want you to focus with me on because we will be using them throughout the lecture. Stress is what? A response of the body to a perceived challenge or threat. The perceived challenge or threat of the body or to the person is called the stressor. The thing that makes you feel stress is known as the stressor. And it is the perceived challenge or threat of the person. Now, stress inherently isn't a bad thing because it is something that Allah has placed within the system of not only humans but animals as well. Because stress has a certain effect on the body. When we look at animals, for example, let's look at a gazelle or a zebra. When it starts perceiving that there is a danger, they start hearing bustling within the grass, they think there's a lion. That is the perceived threat, the stressor. What happens to the body of the zebra is that it releases two chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline. When the stressor is now perceived, the zebra hears something, it thinks it's a lion, it releases cortisol and adrenaline. These two chemicals, these two hormones give the animal or the zebra enough energy for a short period of time to escape. That's the whole reason for stress. So when the zebra perceives this threat, perceives this stressor, it is released with adrenaline and cortisol. That is a short-term release. And that short-term release allows the zebra to escape without being eaten by the lion, and then it survives. So this whole process happens in milliseconds or in seconds. You see sometimes on National Geographic or the documentaries, you see that just as soon as the lion is about to attack, that zebra or gazelle runs away and at amazing speeds. So that is what stress does. Inherently, it's not a bad thing. But when does it become bad? When it is a prolonged period of stress. So like I said, these two hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline, when it's released within the body, it's for a short period of time. So whatever the stress is, it gives you a fight or flight response. It's either you run away from it or you fight it. This is in the primordial sense, the nature sense. So prolonged periods of exposure to cortisol and adrenaline is damaging to the body. That's why you have some people when they go through periods of stress, you see them sometimes they gain weight. Because too much cortisol in the body does that to the body. So that's stress. Moving on to the causes of stress. Causes of stress are two things. Either it's a major life event, whether it's positive or negative. You see sometimes people before they get married, before they're about to get married, they're stressed. So it's not just about negative things. Having someone from your family or friends pass away, that's a major life event. So you have major life event. The second one is small things that give you stress, but they compile over time. So there's small stresses. You're late to work, you're caught in traffic, you get bothered by someone. These accumulate and they cause stress. That's why sometimes when you ask someone, why are you stressed? He says, I do not know. There's nothing major in my life that's happening. There's nothing big that I should be stressed about. However, I am stressed. That's because these small things accumulate and they cause that stress. Now, and again, part of the definition of stress is that it's subjective. What stresses you out might not stress me. What stresses me might not stress you. It is a very subjective thing, and keep that in mind when we look at the treatment of it and when we look at the effects of it. Now, looking at the effects of stress, very, very much has the effects of stress and negative impact on the body itself. You have coronary heart diseases. Because of this stress, it can cause the anger and panic, and that can cause heart diseases. You see sometimes in the soap operas or what they call the musalsalat, when you see the old man, people are yelling at him, there's a family problem, something happens, he grabs his eye and he falls down. That's stress. Can cause coronary heart diseases. Another one is it decreases your immune response. It weakens your immune system. Stress can weaken your immune system, and as a result keeps you more exposed to diseases. Another one is that it causes something by the name of psychosomatic diseases. Psychosomatic diseases are diseases that are caused by the psychological state of the person. So you have things like eczema, you have things like headaches, migraines. This can be caused by stress. Another one that very recently has science begun to understand is that stress or extreme cases of stress can potentially activate or speed up the process of cancer. So when we look at it, we see that the reason why it speeds up the activity of cancer is that it slows down the cell repair process. The cells, how quickly they repair itself is dictated by the hormones of the body. And we said stress, what does it do? It is a prolonged period of the release of cortisol and adrenaline. And because of these hormones, it impacts the cell's repair process. And that, as a result, speeds up cancer. Because the only reason why cancer does not go as fast as some cases is that the cell is repairing itself at a certain rate, but then eventually the cancer either overtakes the cell repair rate and then takes over the body, and then that person dies. But stress can speed that process up. And we've seen a lot of cases where people, when they get cancer, how they perceive this news, because it's major life news. When you get this disease and people tell you, some people are calm. Some people are more resonant with it. Some people, no, they stress. They get worried. And as a result, we see that the body, it speeds the activity of cancer spreading because of the stress. It prevents, it slows down the cell's repair process. And that's from stress. So look at the dangers that it has on the body. Another one, we see this all in real life. It actually hinders your performance. So let's say you're stressed about a driving test. You have a driving test coming up and you're stressed. However, when you look back, you've been driving. When you're on your L's, we've all been through that, or you will all go through that. When you're on your L's and you're driving, whether it's with your parent or someone, you know, you drive perfectly. But once it's the exam date or the date that you're being assessed for your driver's test, your process for activity while you're driving, you start buckling. You make a wrong turn, you don't indicate, whatever it is. Is it because you can't drive? No, you can. But the stress is actually hindering your ability to drive. It makes it worse because of the stress that you have. So instead of you actually doing as well as you thought you would, the stress makes you go through worse. And you're stressed out about that outcome when it's happening because of your stress. And many other impacts of the stress on the body, but I don't want to go through all of them. But then when we look at all of that, we see that our religion has already spoke about this. Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have already spoke about this. When we look at the narration of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he says, Al-ham yudhibul jasad. Al-ham yudhibul jasad. Stress, worry, melts the body away. Not melts as in literally melts, no, figuratively. It disintegrates the body, it hinders the body. Another hadith, alayhi salam, he says, Al-ham nisful haram. Half of aging is this stress, is this worry that you have. And like we said before, the heart diseases, the speeding up of cancer, all these psychosomatic diseases, all of these cause aging. All of this disintegrates your body, ruins the quality of your body because of stress. Amir al-Mu'mineen has said that 1,400 years ago. Another hadith, alayhi salam, he says, or this hadith is by Al-Masih. It's narrated by Al-Masih Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam. He says, Man kathura hammuh suqima badanuh. Whoever has more stress, more worries on himself, the body is what gets ill. The body is what gets impacted and affected because of this. Now, moving on to the treatment of stress. We're going to look at the psychological perspective, and then we look at the hadith of Ahlul Bayt and what they say in response to these theories. The first one is social support. It has been seen that having a positive social circle with people who support you can reduce your stress significantly. How did they come to this conclusion? They done a experiment, which was the people who do blood donations. They saw something with them is that when they give a blood donation, some of them faint. So they see the blood, whatever it is, they faint. They wanted to know, why do they faint? When they're giving blood, when they're donating blood, what happens that they faint? So what they done is they got two groups of people. The first group of people, the normal process. They come, they give a donation, donate blood, and then they leave. The second group, while the participants were donating blood, what they would do is they would have someone there. Someone there just to talk to them. You know, having a friendly conversation. How are you? How's everything? What made you donate blood? Just a friendly conversation. They may laugh, they may have a joke, whatever it may be. They saw with the first group, where there was no person speaking to them, a large population of them fainted. They fainted. However, in the second group, not a single person fainted. In the second group, where that person was speaking to him, having a conversation, having a friendly laugh, not a single one of those participants in the second group fainted. Which shows what? Which shows that who you speak to or your social circle even has an impact on your cardiovascular system, which is something that is very surprising. It is very groundbreaking because we never knew that it had an impact to that point. So that's in that experiment. But then in our day-to-day lives, having good friends that can help us in tough times. You see, sometimes friends, you have to be very careful with who you choose as your friend. Some friends, they're not good for when you're having a tough time. They only want to be there when you're doing well. When you're not doing well, they don't even want to talk to you. They want to be like, oh, you have negative energy, stay away from me. Some people know, some friends, when you go through a tough time, they work it out with you. They sit down with you, you speak to them, what happened, 1, 2, and 3. So it's important to have a positive social circle. Friends, family, because it impacts you in ways that you do not understand. We're just talking about stress, but then when you look at life in general, the way you act, the way you speak, the way you think, a large part of it is dictated by who your friends are. A very large part is dictated by who your friends are. Moving on to the second treatment is optimism. To expect good things will happen. To look at the glass as half full, not half empty, has also shown to have a positive impact on stress. The third one is gratitude. They've done a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is basically they look at a bunch of experiments regarding gratitude. So what they would do, they would put people through periods of time where they would journal their gratitude. So they would tell them at the end of every week, write a letter to someone who you are grateful for. Write a letter to your father, to your mother, to your friend, to your brother, whoever it may be. They saw the group that wrote these gratitude letters. Not only did their effects of stress alleviate, their symptoms of depression were gone, anxiety, their overall happiness was improved. And this is something that is very well established in psychology. The effects of gratitude in happiness in general is profound. And the fourth one is humor. Research has also shown that humor has a positive effect on relieving stress. The main aspect that I think when we look at humor is the fact that you are getting your mind off of what is stressing you. I do not think it is actually the humor in of itself. It's getting your mind off of something that is stressing you, will more than likely than not reduce your levels of stress. Now, moving on to the Islamic perspective. Going on to the ahadith of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We said the first treatment was the social support, having that positive social group with you. When we look at the hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, it is very clear that they try to have their Shia as social as possible, as connected with the people as possible, not to be alone. We have in our fiqh, it is actually makruh to live alone, to sleep alone. It is makruh. You have to be with people, you have to be more social, you have to be connected with others more. And we go through this trouble in our day and age, especially with technology, because you don't really need to be with people anymore. You just have this and that's more than enough. You call people, you speak to people. You don't have to go out with your friends anymore. You don't have to sit down with your family anymore. But that is something we need to be aware of. Spending quality time with your friends, with your family, of course in a halal setting, is extremely important in our religion. We look at the hadith by Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam regarding sleeping alone. He says, فَلَا تَنَمْ وَحْدَكَ فَإِنَّ أَجْرَأَ مَا يَكُونَ الشَّيْطَانِ عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ إِذَا كَانَ وَحْدَهِ. He said, do not sleep alone. Because shaitan becomes most daring or most likely to insert his ideas, his waswas upon you when you are alone. When you are with people who are religious, who are God-fearing, shaitan has trouble getting to you. But when you're alone, it's very easy. فَإِنَّ أَجْرَأَ مَا يَكُونَ الشَّيْطَانِ إِذَا كُنْتَ وَحْدَكَ. So see how Islam is teaching us not to be alone. Because when you are alone, when you leave the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, you get problems like loneliness, tawahud. With the youth especially, with the kids. They get through this problem, they do not want to be next to their family, they do not want to hang out with their friends, they're sitting there in their room, they don't leave their rooms. Because we left the hadith of Ahlul Bayt. Now I brought you the scientific evidence first, because subhanallah, many of the Shia, they want to hear what Dr. Fulan said, and Dr. Fulan said, not what Ja'far ibn Muhammad said. Not what Imam al-Baqir said. That's why I brought you the scientific evidence first. What the doctors say, what the psychologists say, what science says. And now I'm bringing you the hadith of Ahlul Bayt, which is the exact same. What the Ahlul Bayt have been speaking about for a very long time. And what we spoke about in the psychological perspective, the friends, how important friends are in regards to stress, in regards to their impact. We have the hadith of Ahlul Bayt have spoken about that long time ago. We look at the hadith of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, where he emphasizes, pushes the Shia to be supportive of one another, to be supportive of your friend. Like how you want your friend to support you in a tough time, you support others. Where he says, مَا عُبِدَ اللَّهِ بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ إِدْخَالِ السُّرُورِ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِ. There is nothing that is an act of worship that is more beloved to Allah than inserting happiness in the heart of your believing brother or believing sister. ما عبد الله بشيء أحب إلى الله من إدخال السرور في قلب أخيك المؤمن. This teaches us to show emotion with your friend, appreciation with your friend, support with your friend. Make him happy, make him laugh. This is very important in building a strong social circle, a strong connection with your believers. And that's what Islam emphasizes. Another hadith by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, ما قضى مسلم لمسلم حاجة إلا ناداه الله تبارك وتعالى علي ثوابك ولا أرضى لك بدون الجنة. He says there is not a single believer who helps another believer in something except Allah calls out and says, your reward is upon me to give, and I will not give you anything less than Jannah. Look at it. So don't be surprised when the Imam is doing tawaf around the Kaaba and someone calls the Imam, he needs his help. The Imam stops his tawaf. It's the Kaaba, the house of Allah, the place where we pray towards every single day. The Imam stops his tawaf and they ask the Imam, why do you do this, O Imam? He says, the sanctity of a believer is more than the sanctity of this Kaaba. The hurma of the mu'min is higher than the hurma of the Bayt of Allah, the Kaaba itself. Yet, we find ghiba to be a very normal thing within us. We find namima to be a very normal thing within us. We find putting down the other believers a very normal thing. The sanctity, the hurma, is higher than that of the Kaaba itself. Look how much Islam is emphasizing on that positive social circle, that community that helps, that stands for one another, that aids one another, whether it's in money, whether it's in presence, whether it's in time. Giving time is a very important thing. Another one is optimism. We spoke about the psychological perspective where they said optimism has been shown to alleviate stress and has profound effects. We look at the hadith of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, where he says, وَالَّذِي لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ لَا يُحْسِنُ ظَنَّ عَبْدٍ مُؤْمِنٍ بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا كَانَ اللَّهُ عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِهِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. He says, by Allah, if someone has an optimistic outlook towards Allah Azza wa Jal and towards what Allah is doing for him. So even if you're going through a tough time, yet you're optimistic. It's very rare that you see these types of people, but you see them. He's going through a very tough time, but he says, Alhamdulillah, inshallah Allah will make it easier. Inshallah Allah has something great planned for me. This type of optimism, حسن الظن بالله. إلا كان الله عند حسن ظنه. That as soon as he thinks that Allah will do good for him, Allah will do it. What does it mean? What does it mean? You have to focus, you have to read between the lines within these words. Because he says, إِلَّا كَانَ اللَّهُ عِنْدَ ظَنِّهِ. Maybe something Allah has written for him that is going to happen, but Allah doesn't do it. For example, let's say Allah has written for him that he's going to get sick. For example, he's going to get sick in the next 3 days. So he's starting to have a little bit of symptoms here and there of sickness. But then someone comes to him, he says, Shuf, Shan Allah Jai Sawi Bik, look what Allah is doing to you. But then he responds, he says, Allah loves me. He's not going to make me sick. This is a very simple example. Allah's not going to do this to me. He's not going to put me through that pain. A little example of husn al-dhan billah. Allah changes what He has written. Allah has written that he will be sick. But his husn al-dhan billah changed that. Similarly to how dua changes what Allah has written. Husn al-dhan billah does the same. Then the Prophet says, إلا كان عند ظن عبده المؤمن لأن الله كريم بيده الخيرات يستحي أن يكون عبده المؤمن قد أحسن به الظن ثم يخلف ظنه ورجاءه فأحسنوا بالله الظن وأرغبوا إليه. He says because Allah is generous and everything is in His hands. But He gets embarrassed when He sees His servant, the mu'min. He has said that Allah won't do this to me. So Allah won't do it to him. Kareem biyadihi al-khayrat. But yastahi. When he sees his mu'min, his servant, has thought well of Allah. Ahsan al-dhan billah. He thinks that Allah will only do good for him. Allah changes it. He says, because he thought this of me, I will do that for him. However, if you look at the opposite, إذا أساء الظن بالله, if he thinks negatively of Allah, so becomes pessimistic, Allah will also be what he thinks of him. So you see some people, Allah just wants to give me bala. Allah just wants to make my life difficult. Allah, always blaming Allah. And then he goes through difficult times because he had su'u al-dhan billah. Going back to stress, what did I say stress was defined? Stress was a perceived threat. So what's stress? It's very subjective. It's very subjective. You may perceive something as stressful. I may not perceive it as stressful. It's very different from you to me and me to you. So you have husn al-dhan billah. Optimism removes that. Because then you're perceiving everything as good. So nothing you're perceiving is stressful anymore. Whatever you look at, you'll say, this is good. This is from Allah. This is well. This is something that's going to benefit me. As long as I believe in Allah. As long as I have tawakkul ala Allah, no matter how difficult the things are going to be ahead in my life, it is for my best. And your prime example, and I'll end on this inshallah, there were more other aspects, but we won't get to it. And the prime example is the ashab of Imam al-Hussein on the night of Ashura. What's ahead of them? Imam al-Hussein showed them. And Imam Hussein told them, he said, tomorrow, no one's going to survive. All of you will be slaughtered. This is certain. There is no other way around it. So whoever wants to go, اتخذوا الليل جملا. Go, take this night and go away. However, the companions that stayed with Imam al-Hussein, they know they're going to get slaughtered. They know they're going to die. But because they have husn al-dhan billah, they know that they will go Jannah. They know because they are protecting the grandson of Rasulullah, they're going Jannah. So the Maqatil would say that they would welcome the arrows and the spears and the swords with their face and their chest. Look at the pain of an arrow, of a sword, of a spear. They would welcome it with their chest, with their face. Because of their husn al-dhan billah. Because they know where they are going. So once you have that level of certainty, nothing will stress you out anymore. What's going to stress you out? When you know, as long as you have Allah, nothing will put you down. Nothing will stress you anymore. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه ومن شيعته ومحبيه وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات رحم الله من قرأ السورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.